So the Undertaker's undefeated streak came to an end all the way back in 2014 during WrestleMania 30 to none other than the Beast Brock Lesnar. However, prior to that, Undertaker's been essentially unstoppable, whether it be defeating the likes of Jimmy Superfly Snuka, Big Daddy Cole Diesel, Ric Flair, and many more iconic legendary names from multiple generations. In the end, it was Brock Lesnar that ended the Undertaker's undefeated streak, and later on, Roman Reigns would be the next person to defeat the Undertaker. But what if you could have had this impact a whole lot bigger? Now, some things to note in this scenario. I'm actually not going to be having this be Mania 33 Roman, where he actually did beat The Undertaker during the whole when nobody liked Roman still, and when he was a face. But instead, for this year, if The Undertaker never lost to Brock Lesnar, along with that, some things you should also take note. Not only is this not Big Dog Roman, but Tribal Chief Roman. But in this case scenario, Undertaker defeats Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 30, Bray Wyatt at 31, Shane McMahon at 32, Reigns at 33. However, well, I'll also tinker with this match. This match would not be the main event. Give that to Brock Lesnar and Goldberg, because looking back on that match was a lot more deserving as a main event. The pressing match that was The Undertaker versus Roman Reigns. Also, Bray Wyatt wins in this timeline. Why? Because I said so. Also, another thing to note, Undertaker, kind of like how he lost to Triple H in their second WrestleMania bout back at 27, at the end of Roman versus Undertaker won at WrestleMania. Taker gets stretched out. In a similar fashion, Taker gets hit with 3 spears in this match and manages to survive them, along with an additional 2 that at that point starts to humble and really wear out The Undertaker, leading to him being stretched out at the end of the match. But to go on for years after this, Cena loses to Undertaker at 34, just like how he did in real life. And then at 35, you could give him, because I'm going to really balloon this streak, even though Undertaker in his later years kind of struggled, I'd still say he deserves a whole lot better than what he got. So, for WrestleMania 35, we'll give the whole Andre the Giant Battle Royal Memorial, the armbar, a whole lot more worth the value. In this case scenario, Braun Strowman wins and goes on to face and be defeated by The Undertaker. Next year, Boneyard match. Undertaker defeats AJ Styles just like how he did in what would turn out to be his actual retirement match in real life. And then at WrestleMania 37, just so Undertaker doesn't have to deal with a whole lot of physicality, he defeats Elias, because why not? And then you can have Baron Corbin jump Undertaker from behind, challenge him to an impromptu match, and then Corbin falls to Undertaker again. With this, you have Undertaker going into this WrestleMania storyline at 29-0. Now, to start off the story, day 1 of this timeline, once again, the whole Brock Lesnar Roman Reigns situation still going on, except for Reigns doesn't get taken out by COVID. Brock Lesnar winds up getting betrayed by Paul Heyman, not at Royal Rumble, but here at day 1, which also leads to there being no title unification, because let's be honest, Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns didn't need to take the entire roster and kind of whittle them down just for one title feud. Especially since I'm recording this right after watching WWE Backlash, and one of my big complaints there is the fact that we got like one title match for the entire show. The first pay-per-view where Roman Reigns has both belts and neither is defended. But nevertheless, in this timeline, Lesnar can go and have a feud with McIntyre, which you can use to actually properly build McIntyre back up. Lesnar wins the world title off of Big E, except for, once again, just kind of like how my previous video with how I would rebook day 1 all the way to WrestleMania, Big E actually looks like he's worth it. Lashley winds up winning the title off of Lesnar at the Rumble, only to vacate it. Lesnar wins again at the Chamber. And then at Mania 35, you can have McIntyre have his crowning moment in front of fans and win the world title. Now then, for the main story. Reigns boasts about defeating Lesnar, but then he gets confronted by Seth Rollins, and once again, this story I would actually keep almost the exact same, except for, well, the finish is changed. This time around, instead of Reigns essentially losing by disqualification for beating Seth up a bit too much, he just beats him cleanly, because we're just cutting this feud off right here and there. Right here and now. Meanwhile, Undertaker returns in the Royal Rumble and manages to actually win it And before you complain, why are we having The Undertaker win the Rumble? I mean, think of it like this. We're talking about The Undertaker's undefeated streak. To have this whole aura of the undefeated streak, in this timeline being 29-0, along with Roman Reigns retaining against Lesnar, being the Universal Champion, going into this match against The Undertaker of all people, and was speculated to be his final match, you're gonna want to have everything you want. Not to mention, let's be honest, the real life Royal Rumble was kind of trash. I mean, it was a whole bunch of chaos, and in the end of the day, Lesnar won it. But just like in real life, Undertaker's announced for the Hall of Fame class of 2022, and Roman Reigns looks past the Undertaker after the Royal Rumble and goes on to defeat Goldberg just as he did in real life. Now, in the few episodes of SmackDown leading up to this, The Undertaker essentially vows to retire undefeated as undisputed. I'll be real, this is a whole lot better than how it was. So, The Undertaker essentially vows in the weeks leading up to WrestleMania to retire undefeated in the undisputed Universal Champion, as well as seeking for his final match to be his redemption against Roman Reigns, just like how he did against Triple H at the end of the era. Now, on the other hand, Roman Reigns mocks The Undertaker, calling back to their previous match in this timeline about how he essentially almost put The Undertaker on the shelf, and how, well, he's in God mode, operating at a whole different level, and how he will be able to defeat the streak this time, unlike in their previous Mania encounter. Now, this is where I get to kind of mess around a bit more. During the build, you could have social media, Twitter, all these news sites, all of them, essentially giving false information, if you want, about how Undertaker's plan to retire as the Universal Champion, streak intact and everything, and essentially misguide the hardcore fans into believing that Roman's not winning. He may be no longer the big dog, but instead the tribal chief. Along with this, in the few weeks leading up to WrestleMania, Undertaker essentially played his mind games with Roman Reigns and the Bloodline, ranging from a coffin burning with Roman's name on it, a fake Roman puppet similar to when Undertaker sent Diesel puppet, leading up to their Mania match, and along with one of Roman's entrances getting cut off with hellfire blasting from the ring. On top of that, let's actually do something with Shinsuke in this timeline. Shinsuke and Roman Reigns are fighting off in an impromptu match, maybe perhaps on the Madison Square Garden show, where in reality, Brock Lesnar kind of just wanted to murder Austin Theory, while Roman wanted to defeat Seth Rollins in an untelevised match. In this timeline, however, Shinsuke is facing off against Roman, where, as I said before, Roman's entrance gets cut off by Undertaker, and almost cost Roman the title. Shinsuke hits against Sasha, but the Usos have to run in and will essentially give Roman Reigns a loss by disqualification, which you can also use to help build the feud between Rick Boogs and Shinsuke Nakamura, as well as for us to actually use Roman Reigns at WrestleMania Backlash as the champion, instead of just as a guy in a tag match. Meanwhile, Roman comes out on SmackDown, claims The Undertaker fears him, especially given the fact that he had to try to screw him out the title, so Shinsuke could be the one that Undertaker faces, only for more mind games to follow. Throughout the show, another episode of Friday Night SmackDown, Roman would find Jimmy, Jay, and Paul Heyman all in 3 separate caskets before the 3 could, well, essentially flee from the arena. And, well, before they could drive off backstage, Roman Reigns winds up looking around in the car, only to find the Usos and Paul Heyman have essentially been teleported out, and that he's essentially been sent to a graveyard inside this car. And before you say it, let's be real, this is something that The Undertaker would do. The camera cuts to reveal Roman Reigns has been in the graveyard, where every single grave has the name of every single victim of The Undertaker's streak. Coffin with Paul Heyman and the Usos, names all on it, but all 3 are empty. He scoffs only to find a golden tombstone separated from all the rest, labeled 30-0, along with rest in peace, Roman Reigns. Drew addresses previous iterations of Roman Reigns, whether it be Big Dog Roman Reigns, whether it be the Shield Roman Reigns, whether it be Leaki Roman Reigns, FCW Roman Reigns, early NXT Roman Reigns, all coming forth to attack Roman, while Reigns fights them all black. Images other relatives The Undertaker has fought, albeit outside of WrestleMania, appear, ranging from Yokozuna, Rikishi when he threw him off Hell in a Cell, Taker defeating The Rock, along with flashbacks of many men that Paul Heyman has brought to defeat The Undertaker, including CM Punk, and in this timeline, if you remember, Brock Lesnar loses Brock Lesnar, the Dudley Boys, all failing before Roman Reigns is seen, left alone, with a golden grave glowing, slowly opening, surrounded by fire, with images of the last encounter flashing before them, and The Undertaker rises from the grave. Two men brawl. Reigns barely manages to fight off The Undertaker before escaping, with the aid of the Usos and Paul Heyman arriving in another car to pick him up, and that's the last we see of them for the remainder of the show. The following week, Undertaker threatens to rain hell upon Roman Reigns, wait for Reigns to come out, and the match, the main event, is made official. Undertaker versus Roman Reigns in the first time ever, Falls Count Anywhere Hell in a Cell match. Undertaker lays out the Usos before Reigns delivers 5 consecutive spears to The Undertaker, the same amount that led Undertaker out on a casket in their last match. And once again, the closing images of the show could be Undertaker being carried out once again. Next week, Roman is warned of untold levels of hell that will wait for him from the likes of Triple H, Randy Orton, Brock Lesnar, and once again, you remember from earlier on, as I said, Elias and Corbin. Later on in the night, Roman cuts a promo on The Undertaker and vows that he will defeat The Undertaker at WrestleMania. But if he loses, he'll just go off to Hollywood, which could help further the whole rumor and innuendo, as previously stated in this timeline. The SmackDown before WrestleMania, the go-home show, the two meet face to face, and at the end of the show, Undertaker stands tall and holds the Universal title. The Hall of Fame ceremony comes, and once again, this is actually kind of being left the same except for the end of it. Instead of Undertaker giving a bit of an eerie feeling that he'd perhaps come out of retirement, instead he vows that he will retire as the undisputed Universal Heavyweight Champion of